Kia ora and good morning. And can you hear at the back there okay? Yep, cool, you guys are at the back. What I want to do today is I'm going to start by talking a little bit about who we are and what we do in the community recycling sector. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how, even though we didn't know it at the time, what we're doing is really following along in the footsteps of the framework that's been identified by the Inspiring Communities, the people that are working on Inspiring Communities around New Zealand for community-led development. So without being really fully conscious of the fact, we have been totally working our way through all of those steps and all those stages of real community-led development, and our recycle centres have actually become the hubs for community development in New Zealand, around in our own towns all over New Zealand. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion about the sorts of things that maybe some questions if you guys have some, but what really is fascinating me at the moment is the kinds of blocks and barriers we have to working effectively together. The story that I'm going to tell you is really the story of how people work together in their own town to make change, how people work together in their own communities to make change, how we in the environmental and social sector work together to make change, and how as a country we need to be working much more effectively together if we want to achieve our goals. I notice that everywhere I go we struggle to work well together, and that might be just about me, but I don't think it is. I think it's about everybody trying to understand each other's stories and understanding where each other comes from in order to be able to successfully come on in. We're just getting started. So you can see, what I'm, sorry, welcome to you guys. What I'm here to talk about today is community recyclers and how we're helping to save the planet, basically, and how we're trying to work together with people at all walks of life to make change in our world. So you can see I've been talking about user plays, and really what we're trying to do in the community sector is move beyond user pays, which is the story where our councils take our rates money and they give it to multinational companies and other people to solve our problems. The thing that we know is that we can solve our own problems. We have the skills and the capacities and the abilities in our communities to be able to do that for ourselves, and we really don't need to pay a lot of money to people to come from outside to sort out things for us. It's a really interesting thing for us to talk about because social enterprise is really the world of user plays. It's all about us doing things for ourselves. So one of the things that they identified in the Inspiring Communities framework is that great community development is community-led and locally driven. So in our towns and in our communities, we had groups of people who got together to say, we want to be able to play a role in the future that we want to build in our place. We really want to start getting our own places working the way that we want to see them work in the future. And we didn't see a lot of other people coming to the table with the solutions that we were looking for. Most community recyclers started around New Zealand because nobody else would provide recycling services for us. And in the first community recyclers started in New Zealand in 1989. By the time a lot of new ones were starting to form based on that model in 1999, our people were calling for recycling services, but the government and private sector weren't stepping up to provide them. And there was a big gap that a lot of us stepped into to create little businesses in our own communities to provide our own services. The big companies now are starting to come, and now that they can see that it's viable, they want to come and take that off us. And so a lot of what we've been doing is sort of fighting for our space. So community-led and locally driven. Around the country we've got a lot of different community organisations. Most of them are working in rural or smaller communities, and we have quite a strong mandate to support one another as best we can, and our recycling network is really all about sharing skills and knowledge and abilities and trading ideas so that each of our communities can benefit from what the work that the others have already done. We've got around about 30 members, and we have collectively, we provide about 500 jobs across New Zealand. Some places might have 1 or 2 jobs, or the biggest recycle centre that's in the network in CED up in Kaitaia provides about 70 jobs, and they have a multi-million-dollar turnover. And we're looking at developing international networks so that we can learn not only from one another here in New Zealand, but we can learn the lessons that our friends in community recycling in the UK and community recycling in Australia and people who are working in social enterprise and community business all around the world. We're looking for the lessons that they can share with us. So this is one example. Wanaka Wastebusters is the place that I come from. And this is just an example of the kinds of activities, so to give you a practical sense of the sorts of things we do. We do straight recycling, so we do curbside contracts for our councils, we do processing and handling of all sorts of different materials, so everything from tin cans and bottles to polystyrene, plastic film, like a wide range of products and materials get taken through our sites. We do campaigning and lobbying, so we tend to, whenever we get some spare cash, we roll around the country trying to persuade people to behave differently, mainly focusing on government and local government to try and have an influence over what they're up to. We do a lot of community education through working in partnership with others. Really our community story is about finding other people who are doing things well and buddying up with them and supporting one another to do better. It's not about trying to take over someone else's job or to make, to kind of get their skills off them so we can have them. It's all about supporting one another so that we can all grow more. So we work with Enviro Schools and the Regeneration Network and the Zero Waste Education guys from Tauranga to deliver our education programs through schools. Have big commercial recycling kind of team that do events and business collections. So pretty much every business in Wanaka is proud to recycle now. 10 years ago they laughed at us when we suggested that that might be a good idea to give us their recyclables and we would look after them for them and give them a good story to tell their customers, but nowadays they love it. We have reuse shops all over the country. Wanaka Wastebusters has a reuse shop, Extreme Waste in Raglan has a great reuse shop, Kaitaia, CED has a great reuse shop. And that's a really amazing way of drawing people into your sites and sharing the stories of what it means to use old things and make them new again, to value things that a lot of our clothes and a lot of our furniture and a lot of our stuff that people in our town that work in the service sector use to be able to live in a very expensive tourist town. Comes through our shops, and so it's a way of getting those goods flowing around and being used again. And we also work on sort of national projects collectively, like on the road recycling, we're working on a tourist recycling scheme, and there's lots of projects that we try to use our depots to be able to run a nationwide scheme, and that's something that's developmental for us. So the example of Wastebusters is really just a shorthand for the example of what organisations all around the country are doing, very similar sets of activities, although each organisation is quite different in some ways. We all do the same kind of stuff. So we think of it as biodiversity. It's great to have all those different people doing the same kinds of things, but maybe slightly different focus for each one. So this is, some of you will know Vivian Hutchinson, and he's been a great inspiration to us, talking about things that are powerful and moving us and things that are powerful and calling us to act on behalf of our communities. The thing that I love about this is the idea of there is something more powerful than an idea whose time has come, and that's a question whose time is yet to be. And for us, we're motivated by the questions that we ask ourselves. We're saying, well, what would it mean to live in a world without waste? What would it mean to live in a world where we don't waste people and we don't waste things? Where we take those people and those things and we use them to get skills and money and goods flowing around in our economies, our local economies. And what would it mean to be able to solve the problems that we face in our own time? And what would it mean to build our capacity as a community to work together on a project and then to be able to deliver good solutions and to build our confidence and our courage around that so that we can tackle more problems and more things that we want to try and achieve and to see happen. So we've got some big questions at the heart of the work that we do. How can we invest in this world that we have now to build the world that we want to have in the future? The Inspiring Communities framework talks about growing from your assets and your strengths rather than growing from a lack or a negative focus. So you're building up, you're saying, what have we got? What have we got amongst us that we can put together to build a great story, to build a great place, to build a great business? Rather than saying, well, we're lacking this and we've got all these problems, you're saying, well, what have we got we can grow from? And so that's a really important element of the community-led development. The thing that we have in our sector is we have passion obviously all of you will have seen some version of this over the last 20 years. Everyone's talking about, what does it mean to have triple bottom line? What does it mean to be quadruple bottom line? Whatever. But really it's saying, how can we do economics as if people and the planet actually mattered? Some of us in community sector are really driven by environmental questions, like say in Wanaka, the environment is big on our list. If you're from Kaitaia, job creation and work opportunities is much higher on your list. And so it's really that people and the planet and the economy combination that we're trying to pull together all those threads and make it work. The great thing with social enterprise is it gives us the idea of business as a tool. We're kind of used to the idea of business as a predator, or business as something that wants to come along to people and take from people and the environment to make money that then goes off to be used to buy Italian shoes or a speedboat, or invest in some shares in some other place, or the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to turn that on its head. And with social enterprise, it's a very powerful model because it says, how can we use a cash flow of resources, of goods and of money to generate well-being for our people and our place? And so that's what our businesses are all about. Community enterprise is the label that we stick on our model, and that's very similar to social enterprise. If anyone who's been involved in this field will know, there's like a stack of documents about this high that looks at what shall we call ourselves. So I'm not going to get into any discussions about what we call ourselves, but really the whole story that underlies our recycling story. We got involved in recycling because we could use that as a vehicle for engagement, and we can use that as a practical thing to focus on while we work on all these other things. Recycling for us is a vehicle, it's not a destination. So recycling is about empowerment, it's about growing the skills and capacity we have, it's about building an asset base. A lot of us now have assets on our balance sheet that enable us to borrow from someone like Prometheus and fund our capital investment in our work. If we didn't have those assets on our balance sheet, we could never go to a banker like Westpac now that they're ready to talk, and we wouldn't have anything to put on the table from our side. Growing infrastructure, buying trucks and gear and tarsiel and equipment that enable us to do our work. And also the community infrastructure of working together and sharing knowledge and resources and pooling our skills and our talents and all of that kind of soft infrastructure as well. We're looking at creating activists, and a lot of people their eyes roll back in their heads when I talk about activism. But really what that's about is saying, well, if you believe in something, how can you work together with your friends and relations in your town with the stuff you've got to make things different? It's about taking action for what you believe in. It's not all about protesting. It's about constructively building something positive for the future. It's about meaningful jobs. A lot of us in the tourist towns don't want our kids to grow up to be toilet cleaners and coffee makers, which is really pretty much what their options are, or a motel owner maybe, if they're lucky. We want them to have jobs that are meaningful, that make a difference in helping them to build a nation that we can all feel like we're part of. And local economic development, I'll talk a wee bit more about later, but our whole purpose is to build our local economies. So some of you, going back to user plays, the idea of co-production is something that's coming up in the literature, and really the whole idea is that the people that use the services, the people in your own local town, the people that are there, know best about what they're looking for, and they're the ones who are best placed to provide services that are a good fit for their own community. So we're kind of trying to go beyond that kind of tokenistic idea of Trans-Pacific coming to our communities, giving us recycling that's not really recycling, and that doesn't generate good social and environmental outcomes, but we are paying big bucks to our rates money to be able to get that service in place. And often we're sadly disappointed with the sorts of outcomes that's dropping down to us. And I think the great thing about community sector is we offer an alternative model where the recycling isn't the meat in the sandwich. The recycling is really just, the kind of like the spread that keeps it all going. It's a vehicle for us to use rather than the end. One of the most common criticisms of me by my board is that I start things that I don't know how to do yet, and I don't always wait till I know how to do it before I get started. And I say, well, I can sort of see that it could work, I'm going to get started, we're all going to be working on it, and as we go along we're going to figure it out, and any mistakes we make we're going to learn from, we're going to talk to our friends and relations, we're going to find out what to do next. And that's a big part of community-led development. We don't need to know the answer before we get started. We can get started and figure out the answers along the way. So the story of community recycling, basically if you dig through the photo box in any community recycler's file system, you'll find a photograph that looks a bit like this. In the beginning there was nothing. And the people usually, like this is Wastebusters, but it's the same if you look at the Kaitaia photos. There's a picture of just a big flat landfill with a half-built shed, or I'm sure Raglan's the same. You know, in the beginning there was nothing, and now people got together in our town. About 200 people came down. Some people brought food, some people looked after people's kids, some people came and did building. And we basically just had a big Quaker barn raising type experience where we built our own recycle centre. And that became the centre for all of the energy and the activity. So you can see we started off with pretty much nothing. And over 10 years we've cranked it up, and now we've got heaps of gadgets, and we've got Tarseo, and we've got a stack of plans and traffic plans and health and safety plans and management plans and all the technical kind of blah you need to have in behind you to make you a good operator. But really it's about us building confidence, gathering together the resources we need. We started off, we didn't have a single machine. Now we've got you know, trucks and loaders and forklifts and new forklifts, and it's quite an amazing process for us to look back and to say, well, I guess it's like the shoemaker in the elves, you know, every night you kind of cobble together another couple of pairs of shoes and hop them off so you can buy the next gadget that you need. You don't need to start off with a multi-million-dollar budget. You can start off with pretty much nothing and cobble together a few things, and sometimes that's a really good way of going about it as well. It's just as valid as blowing a fortune in the first instance and setting yourself up with the perfect site. So the story that I'm telling is about making investments. It's about choosing what you're going to invest in your community to drive it forward in the way that you want to drive it forward. You know, a big part of the community-led change movement or the community-led development movement is to be able to talk to one another about what we're doing and how it's working, and to learn from one another, and to be able to show that it's possible. So in some ways coming and speaking like this is a way of sharing the knowledge that going from nothing and no knowledge and no gadgets to, you know, a thriving community business is entirely possible in 10 years. It's happened all around the country. People like me who didn't know much about it to begin with have come along. We've managed to work together with our friends and relations to be able to generate some really good little local businesses. A lot of us have some of the largest businesses in our town. And that's quite a meaningful thing when you go along to Chamber of Commerce and you're saying, well, yeah, we've got 30 staff, and people are going, what? I thought you guys were the community guys. We're going, yeah, we're community guys, and we're the business guys, and we're the environmental guys. You know, we are everybody. One of the projects that we've worked quite hard on, which may be useful to some of you, is you heard them talking this morning about using procurement processes to choose wisely. You know, our rates money gets blown on all sorts of crazy projects, and it gets given to tenderers who may not necessarily have our long-term good at heart. What we're arguing for is, you know, if you're going to take $500,000 of our rates money in Wanaka, or Kaitaia, or Raglan, or wherever you might be, we want you to spend that well in a way that's going to spin off a lot of other benefits. We don't want you just to blow it on someone who's going to give us recycling and that's it. We want you to spend it on somebody that's going to give us recycling and jobs and training and environmental education and a great reuse shop and sort of social, you know, driving social change through lobbying and all of that kind of stuff. So we've been doing some work on that, and we worked with an econometrics professor from Waikato University, and he does what they call sort of regional multiplier work, which they basically plug lots of numbers in about how money gets spent and look at where it ends up after different rounds of spending. And what we discovered through working with Warren was that when you spend, the green bars are, this is like what ends up in the local economy, what ends up in the New Zealand economy, and what goes offshore. So if you take, say, you know, the 500,000 we spend on recycling in Wanaka a year, for every dollar that gets spent with a community recycler, 80 cents stays in our own town. If you spend that same dollar with a national contractor, only 22 cents stays in your own town. And if you spend it with a big multinational company, only 15 cents of that dollar is in the first round of spending stays in your own town. So you're basically exporting your rates money pretty fast if you're choosing the outside guys. And you can see that sort of, you can see the different patterns as you go through. Community recyclers, very little of that money goes offshore. When you get into the multinational company, obviously their job is to come to your town, get your money and take it home. So that's their raison d'etre in a simplest form. So it's easy to understand why most of, a big lump of money is getting exported back to Australia or back to probably now Italy. They know that Italy's bought out one of the biggest recyclers. And you can see that the only people that have more than $1 staying in New Zealand are the community sector. And I think that you could argue that this would hold true for a small local business as well. It used to be that a lot of our local recyclers and waste companies and those sorts of people were local businesses who did all their business in their own town. So I don't think it's something that's only about community sector. I think it's also about local supply. Well, we've got lots more detail on that. If anybody's interested, come and talk to me. The other thing we're doing is kind of trying to model best practice. We have people saying, gee, we had a great event, we diverted 30% of our rubbish. And you're kind of going, well, actually that's not really a good outcome. People are saying, we're so great, we diverted 30%. We're saying, well, in the community sector, it's normal to divert 85%. And we learnt that off the guys at Extreme Waste, so they were saying, oh yeah, we're getting 80% easy. So we're going, right, well, we better start trying to do that in Wanaka. And one of the great things about community sector is we do really set high bars. In our contracting, one of the things that I think sort of alarms our council and it also surprises them is that we regularly hit 100% on our KPIs. We only have to get 63% to keep our contract, but we always get 100 because we want to do the best job we can. Some of the other guys that we're competing against price their tenders to hit 63, which is why we don't always get the results that we're looking for when we're in our, with our rate spend. And the other thing that we, thinking about how do you be a model for people in your world, this slide for me is it's one of the things my executive also says to me is you can't change the world, it's much too big for you. And I say, I can change my world. We can change our world. Every bit that we can touch, we can change. It's not about trying to change the world. If we all look after our own little piece, that's that local global thing. If we all look after our own bit, the world will change. But if we don't invest in our own places and we don't invest our time in our own relationships, we're not going to get there. So this is a great story about, some of you might have been involved in the 350 campaign when it was, might be a year ago now. This is Bill McKibben who came to Wanaka and some of our local primary school kids heard him speak. And Bill's a great champion for 350 parts per million and global warming, an advocate for taking action versus global warming. And some of our local kids are saying, oh, what could we do that would make a difference? We're so small, we're only, we're just kids. And we're saying, look, if you guys get behind it, then you are part of a big world and there's going to be people all over the world who are going to be doing this. And so our guys set up a 350 kilometre fun run after their athletics day, and they got everyone, all the teachers and all the parents to run around with them, and this is a photograph of them up in Times Square. And when they saw this photograph come back through the wires, and it was up on CNN as one of the early photos for 350, they were going, oh my God, what we do does make a difference. Mm-hmm. Us as 10, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids in Wanaka, which is the bottom of, back of beyond in New Zealand, let alone the back of beyond in the world, we can be in Times Square with Bill, who was our hero 6 months ago, telling us we could be part of something much bigger. We can be in Times Square too. And I think that's a really interesting thing for them to kind of get the hang of, that you can do your own little bit and it can really roll out. But as grown-ups, we have to show some real leadership for our younger people coming through to support them in that. A big thing that I'm kind of talking about a little bit at the beginning was the idea of working together across the boundaries. And some of you may have heard that Wanaka's been designated a lifestyle reserve now. So I'm officially one of the exhibits. I can't ride a bike to save myself, so I'm actually not a very good, they never let me out in the front. Yeah. But one of the big jobs that we do is maintain that brand. Like when people come to town, they're being sold this fabulous story of in New Zealand, 100% pure, here it is, on a plate for you to come and kind of observe. And when they get there, a lot of the people that come to visit are a bit surprised to find that there's not really much evidence of that. So, we kind of a big part of what we do is working with our townspeople to maintain that brand. and provide solutions for all the commercial operators, to provide solutions for the schools, to provide solutions. And you can see, you know, the story of taking care is the story of our beautiful 100% pure place. We have to connect those dots. We're working with a national project that CRN is working on, is looking at recovering e-waste year-round. So having, instead of 1 year e-days, having every day is an e-day. You can bring your stuff down, and a lot of that's about building a chain to take products back. It's really about working together with all the people in the supply chain to not just get things to the shop and into your house, but once you're finished with them, to be able to get them back out and get the materials coming back around into the system again. And this is the same sort of thing, working to get, you know, maintain that brand, get visitors to be able to find recycling centres all around the country. The Jason's maps and the AA maps now, because of a project that we've been working on, have all of the recycling centres that you can find as a tourist on the map. So if you've got any bag of, you know, you're always hearing about the rotten tourists who are going around defiling our country by throwing their rubbish out at the lay-bys and stuff, most of the time the reason is they don't know what else to do with it, and no one's really giving them very good support to find a better solution. So this is really just saying, you know, your recycling wants to go on its own journey. Here's how you participate, here's how you take part in looking after this beautiful place you've come to. And you know, the last thing that the Inspiring Communities guys talk about as part of their framework is that you're aiming for the whole system to change. You're not looking for, you know, you're not tinkering around with your own little bit. You're actually feeding energy out into the whole system, and that everything is connected up. It's like a ecosystem. And the thing that most of us know is that you know, recycling is only the first step. It's a really tiny part of the whole bigger picture of material and energy flows in the world, the relationships with people and how things happen in our recovery systems. So we've got to go beyond recycling and start to push our way back up the chain into the redesign and reuse sort of side of things. Education for sustainability is about a lot more than teaching kids which things go in their recycle bin. It's about empowering people to make change in their world. And so we're heading back up to the top of the cliff to try and have an influence over what's getting chucked off. This, I don't expect you to be able to read this, but really it's just that story of the ecosystem of recycling. It's sort of saying that we've got the reprocessors and the product designers and the manufacturers and the wholesalers and the consumers and the collectors and the councils and the processors all involved in this really, really complex ecosystem of material and energy flows. If one person isn't doing their job properly, then you can have that whole system starts to collapse and be degraded. And that's really the story that we've been hearing in the news lately about, you know, do commingled systems give us good enough quality products coming out the other end for the reprocessors? Do, you know, if something's got no label on it, it can end up as a contaminant in a stream and end up being a problem for people further down the chain. So the whole recycling ecosystem, you have to have, when we're talking about effective product stewardship, what we mean is that when something comes into that system, we have to know what the impact's going to be all the way down the chain. We have to understand what the consequences are. We have to understand how we're going to get a computer back into all the parts it was made from so we can make another one. We have to understand how to design things wisely, and all of those things are quite complex. So, you know, obviously we're small players in that world, but every relationship we have, we use that opportunity to push back up the chain. And at the moment, one of the things that we've got going on around New Zealand, some of you may have heard it, if you haven't, you can go to Unpack It, www.unpackit, and make your votes. This is your chance. Really it's saying, well, consumers are getting lumbered with the burden of being the people who have to choose. You know, you say, oh, but all you have to do is choose wisely and then dispose of it properly and everything's going to be fine. It's the burden's all on you. And the reality is that consumers have very little information. We did a survey as part of this project, which is sent a travelling circus roadshow, of the Roadshow of Joy, they're calling themselves. And they have gone from Invercargill to Kaitaia, basically talking to people, to consumers, about how do you choose well, and helping to give them the tools that they need to be able to choose well. Yeah, so there's always something you can do. We try and make it fun, and we learnt that off the other guys in the community sector that we saw having fun. We're going, you're going to learn a lot more if somebody who's exciting, dynamic, juggling, walking on stilts talks to you about packaging than if someone comes along and goes, you know, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. Yeah, and arguing for recycling that makes sense. So that's really that point about having systems that actually work, so that when you put your recycling in the bin, you know that it's going somewhere that's going to be socially and environmentally acceptable for you. So it's basically just those 6 points. You know, we're looking at things that are community-led, working from a point of strength. You know, working from what you've got rather than working from a sense of lack. Learning and adapting as you go rather than waiting till you know all the answers before you get started. You know, demonstrating change and development and doing everything you can to share what you know with others. Really trying to work across the boundaries, so even if you're a small fish in a big pond, you've still got lots of opportunities to have an influence and to make your point of view known and to have a say in how things are going to happen. And that we're really seeking whole system change. We're not looking for, you know, because saying recycling is a vehicle for us, but it's a way for us to engage with people to really get them thinking about what living in a better world could mean. And this is actually another thing sort of stolen from Vivian Hutchinson, the idea that we've got to shift away from organising our problems, which is what a lot of what we do is, to solving them. And they're two different things. You know, we invest a lot of energy in organising our problems, and if we keep on doing that, we're not going to get anywhere different. You know, we really have to, rather than just sort of flatlining it, you know, through the same old, we really have to say, what is it that's going to lift us off the ground and get us to our, you know, our dreamland. And this is the last one. You know, so community recyclers, you notice nowadays there's a lot of people coming in going, oh yeah, our company's been going for this long and we've been so great ever since. So community recyclers, we've been connecting recycling with sustainability since 1989. If recycling's good in terms of graffiti, you know, if that's a graffiti in your town, then I think you're on a pretty good road. So that's about it.
Thank you very much. She asked me to remind her after 30 minutes. I couldn't.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Good.
It was so inspiring hearing you say that we cannot change the world, but we can change our world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's time to take questions.
Yeah. So what I was thinking is we've got time for questions if anybody has anything they want to know, or we can, so maybe we'll start there. Yep.
My name's Gretchen. I'm with Eco Matters.
I thought you looked familiar.
We met at a party, and that was a great party.
Yeah. Community recyclers party.
Yeah, it was a community recycling party.
Yeah.
We were in the insulation space. We're one of the first community groups to get into retrofitting houses, and worked with funding from ECA.
Yeah.
And what we found was that we did that for 5 years, and slowly but surely the big players in the insulation industry started to kind of close down on us, and we actually had to get out of insulation a couple of years ago. And what we found, the reason why, was because ECA, who's Government Department of Energy Conservation, had a bucket load of money, and they wanted most houses retrofitted for the lowest price. That's what they were interested in. They didn't actually want to know about community.
Yeah.
What I find really inspiring about the Community Recycling Network is your ability to kind of stave off the big boys. And I just wonder about getting the procurement, really influencing procurement policies at both local government and central government to ensure that community outcomes are factored in to tenders. If you could comment on
I think it's a really challenging thing for anybody who's a small player, because most of us are place-bound, and the reason that we're involved in our projects and the reasons we're doing our projects is because we love our place. And we're not interested in setting up a global recycling company that's going to take over the world. We just want to do a service in our own local environment. And generally it's exactly the story that you're talking about, that we're going through a tender round now where we have to compete with 7 other people who want to take our job off us. Those 7 people don't live in our town, they don't work in our town, they don't have any stake in our place. And so they're coming with a little bit cynically said earlier, their idea is to come to our town, get our money and go home. They might put a bit of a shiny gloss on that by saying, oh yeah, obviously we've got a sustainability policy and a health and safety policy, so we're not going to we're going to try and do the best we can while we're here, but generally their interest is not the long-term well-being of our place. And I think all of us have really struggled the last 10 years with that, because it has been totally, jobs have been off the radar, local economics been off the radar. Until the GFC, no one was talking about community sector being good for generating jobs and well-being and those sorts of things. Because people were saying, oh, we're all rich and happy and we can spend whatever we want on our credit cards at McDonald's in the warehouse. We don't need you guys. But I think that the thing that heartens me is that we've got to change. And although when I first heard about the GFC, I was kind of going, yes, this is our day. We're going to have the big change that we've been looking for in the way that people think. I don't think we've actually had that. But I think that people have become much more conscious of the value of community and the value of the deeper story. And they're starting to understand, like I was saying, what I discovered when I read the Inspiring Communities documents in the last few months was that we actually been doing it all along.
I know.
And and you never knew it. You didn't know you were an inspiring community or that you were following some kind of template for development. But so I think that we're in a good position to push. We fight really, really hard. A lot of what I've done in my role has been to say, what information can we get on the table? How can we work with big players who can't speak in the public environment to get the stories out about material quality? And hear what I've heard lately, which is maybe that may or may not be a fact, is that they're starting to question the MRF in Auckland now, and starting to look at whether or not that contract actually is the best contract for the whole of Auckland, and starting to really say, well, we put this kind of big box solution in, we're just not getting the outcomes we were looking for. And I think that in our sector, we've kind of got to that stage now where there's been enough failures of those big, glorious, we're going to solve all your problems, just give us 27 million solutions, that people are starting to say, well, these guys who are sort of barking, we're sort of like the beech forest in the valleys, we're sort of barking from outside the fence saying, there is another way, you guys. And we've clung on mostly by the skin of our teeth, I would say. And we've really proactively tried to push our story out there so that we stay alive in people's minds. And I know the insulation story is very similar. Just people getting squeezed out because it's much easier to have one big guy selling pink stuff than it is to have 27 little players all involved, in an administrative sense. Same story.
So, I come from Wanaka, and we had a fantastic clean stream. Clean stream's still going, but we had a contract for all our waste, and exactly that happened. We had a big Australian tender come in, a John Banks-based council that just were out to nail us, and they did nail us. And we tried to sort of counter that by making lots of little media stories and stuff like that. Do you do the same thing? Do you use media all the time to put out positive messaging in what you're doing? Or?
A lot of what we've done, because we've got very limited resources, is just to target the councils. And so we're talking to the councils all the time. We're trying to get good evidence on the table. From America and the UK, there's some very good evidence in support of the failures of the systems that they've put in there. And so we sort of bark in that direction. But having those videos and those stories coming out really does affect people's hearts. And I think that in the short term we may win and lose a few battles, but in the long term I feel confident that those sorts of methods are the ones that are going to sell. Hear Len Brown up there today saying if you guys have been bidding for that contract when Len Brown was there, you'd have a totally different reception, I would say. And so maybe that's, the last time in the local body elections there was a big shift towards the left, and I think that that's going to be valuable for everybody. But there's obviously sacrifices like Gretchen's talking about and like you're talking about along the way.
I'm Leo Bartlett from Australia, so I've got to answer that. But I agree with you. It's probably CEDA, was it?
Trans-Pacific.
Oh yeah, that's the other one. I'm really interested in this. There was two kind of questions. I have a second one a little later. In terms of how do you strategically engage. Now obviously there's an education process. Like I'm in Western Sydney the other day talking to two councils there. They have no idea about social benefits, social responsibility in that sense. They've just leased out contracts 15 years to the two big companies, one CETA in particular, and so they don't know where to go. If you go to South Australia, you have a similar kind of thing, but they're more generous. They do have an understanding of procurement policy, except that they have someone in mind. So immediately what we're doing is racing off with someone in mind and finding that we can actually, it's wonderful outside of Adelaide, wonderful recycling business. Their distinctive character, by the way, is they also sell on the net, like eBay, as well as doing all the kind of things you mentioned. So we're actually going to go into partnership with them. The second, so there's the strategy of partnership, and there's also that three-way, private provider, government, and the enterprise. If you can actually bring those together, that's what we're trying to do with Western Sydney anyway. The other kind of question I was going to ask was, you said nothing about the workers. I'm coming from a disadvantaged young people sort of position. So it's providing not just employment, but could also be work readiness for those kind of kids. The one I saw in Adelaide was disabled, and we know there's one number of those around. Do you want to say something about the workers and how that also produces a social benefit or spin-off?
I guess the thing to acknowledge is that different recycle centres come from different places with that. So we have 2 big members of Community Recycling Network who pretty much all of their staff, or 3/4 of their staff are people with mental health needs. They're clients of mental health services, and so they provide work and training and opportunities that are a good fit with people who are not able to be at work fully functional every day. And for them, that's the primary purpose. Some people are, more primary purpose around environmental outcomes, and I would say that all of our organisations have a very strong focus on empowering our staff and on training and supporting our staff to grow in their own personal sense, in the sense of becoming more powerful people in the world, but also in skills development and training that enables them to take up other opportunities. It's a difficult market in New Zealand because we haven't had a lot of, say, in the 90s, early 2000s, there's quite a lot of support to do that kind of work, but a lot of us have been basically run a straight business, so we don't have any government subsidies to support people with any sort of special needs. Most organisations do have a really strong mandate to make sure that we do have high labour approach rather than a high capital approach. And some people would say that you're putting people into, low quality manual jobs. I come from the shearing sheds in the Wairarapa, that's where I grew up, and for me I have a real respect and love for manual work, and there's a lot of people who love to work physically and are really successful at that. They're never going to be an IT wizard, they're never going to be someone who can be a statistics magician, but they're awesome at physical, using themselves to be a really awesome part of a team that's achieving some great results. And I think that that's something that we really have focused a lot on, is building up our ability to support our people. And those people can be anything from, really with some quite definite impairments in how they operate, to some of my guys who are pretty high end who also have some impairments in how they operate. So that having high end people doesn't mean they're any easier to manage or to look after. And we find that we're trying to deal with the diversity of our communities. We're trying to make sure there's a place for everyone in our community and our organisation.
So can I just enter that, just like as an example, one of our workers is about 16 or 17, and he was hanging around with his brother-in-law who wasn't, that good, and so they were breaking in, and so they got caught and they went to court, and he didn't go to, the other guy got 2 years imprisonment, and our worker, he's lovely, he's got like an 8-month-old baby, he's the sweetest guy, and so he didn't go to jail because he was working at extreme waste. And so lots of the people that we employ would be unemployed in our towns, and causing perhaps a bit of trouble.
It's a really important thing to keep in mind, all those different roles that you play as a provider, of a social service, of giving work to people that maybe would be getting into trouble otherwise.
And then he got 200 hours community
Yeah.
work, so
He's doing it.
so
Yeah.
well.
We do joke sometimes that we've got a significant amount of credit if we ever did get into trouble. We've probably got like 7 years of community service that we've already in credit for. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a really big part of it.
Hi,
Yep.
I'm Taz from the Maungi's Family Service Centre, and I'm the Community Enterprise Development Officer there. And through last year meeting Jackie, we looked into try and set up an initiative in our own Maungere area. We have 60,000 people,
Yeah.
1,500 houses. So from taking a look at the regular model where they've got 2,000 or something houses, is that correct? Or 4,000?
Yeah.
2,000?
Yeah.
Well, the reuse shop makes about 40 grand a year, so
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, times that by 8 in our area, that's
Yeah.
like 300 and something K.
Yeah.
And through researching and trying to learn how to set that up, with the Super City setup, they've just released the big manual talking about how it's on the go, which basically says this, they don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they're still trying to work it out themselves.
Yeah.
Like Waitakere, the organic pickup place charges every household $11.50. So of course in their area they make money off that, and there's no real competition outside of that, bar one or two companies that pick up an organic at something like $80 per cubic meter.
Yeah.
So you're trying to set it up in our area
Yeah.
and trying to get across to our board that, like you said, I suppose the winning line I took from you would be that recycling is a vehicle to engaging.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that I grabbed onto, and I think that's
Yeah.
what I'll take back to our board to try and push across, because I went back with costings of like say 2.6 million and 1.5 to set up
Yeah.
and things like that. But I guess from your model and what you're doing, like you're taking on the competition and still running it, I
Yeah.
guess we could learn some things off you as well as Jackie, and
Yeah.
trying to mix the models, and maybe
we
we
learned
could,
off Jackie in the first place.
yeah, maybe we could team up to beat Auckland City and get something
Yes.
going or something, since you've got all that knowledge and experience of how to deal with
Yeah.
it.
From looking at the documents that are coming out from the Auckland City Waste Review, they've done their review of their waste plan, or it's
Waste assessment.
yeah, the waste assessment. They've done their waste assessment. They've come out with some recommendations, and one of those recommendations is that there are some, community-based facilities. So I think there's a doorway there. And listening to what Len Brown was saying today, I would say that he'll be 100% behind seeing things like that get started. I know that the big fear for councils like ours were, we don't want to go too far too fast. We want to see some small things survive and succeed and go well before we start to invest big time in these, take the big risks. So it might be worth talking a bit more about this and thinking about, like, reuse shops are a great starting point, and take back depots for computers and e-waste and other products that people are, coming to the end of their life, batteries and oil and phones and all of that kind of stuff, which is really having those community depots, and then that gives you foot traffic, and it gives you a place to start connecting up with community members and place to work and some revenue streams. And maybe starting off with some of those little pockets and buildings that already exist. You got Len saying, we've got buildings, we've got land, we'll give it to you for a peppercorn rental. I'd be hitting him up saying, right, I'm from Mangere, which bits can I have, because this is my dream, and I know that it works because I've seen it happen in other places. And people from overseas come to Wanaka, and I don't really know what to say this on camera, but we have a town of about 6,000 people. We turn over $1.7 million. We've got 25 full-time equivalent staff scavenging out of the dump. Now that's basically what we do. We scavenge stuff. Nowadays we moved upstream, so instead of waiting for people at the dump, we go around the back of their business and grab it off them before they put in their trailer. But we've set up a whole lot of different, some of them are contracts, some of them are little business units. And I'm sure that that's something that you guys can get into. It's just a matter of picking your winners and find, like, for us, the big thing is getting a home base. So if you can secure a building and a piece of land that you can set up, then you can start to work from there to say, okay, we want to get a little truck to do those inorganic pickups like they do in Porirua, and it sounds like in Waitakere. And we want to have a space for stuff to come so that people can trade stuff. We want to have, I take the point about eBay, and I know in Waitakere they send a lot of stuff to eBay, but I think they make a fraction of what we make in Wanaka by selling stuff to our own people. And basically all we're doing is swapping money and stuff over and over and over again, and it's the same money and the same stuff, but we're just, that's all economies are. Yeah, it is, yeah, that's all an economy is people swapping money and stuff. It doesn't matter if you do it with your neighbours or the Australians, You're better off doing it with your neighbours because you've got a better chance of getting your money back. Oh, this lady.
Can I just have a quick word? I'm the note taker.
Yeah.
So we're on the
Can I have your notes?
Good luck.
pen's been going, pen's on fire. But we're actually on the section now where we're looking at actions and next steps and research that we might do. So to capture that, I'd like to sort of ask is, well, I've just got this lot you've just been talking about, like reuse shops, take back depots, speak to land facilities on peppercorn rentals, a place for stuff to come to,
Yeah.
and be proactive.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to add to that, which will go on forward from here to be available?
Probably connecting up work and training, maybe. And maybe these guys have got some ideas.
I was just going to say that we're looking at similar initiatives, so we should talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait.
So talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
network.
And working on shared projects is the big
Yeah,
take home
yeah.
from this. It's kind of like the only reason we're successful is that we talk to other guys who are doing it, and we follow them around and go, what do you do? How do you do that? Can I borrow your financial guy so he can show me how to do this? You know, we share people who have got skills between us, and you know, we share inspiration. And if I'm feeling a bit bleak, I'll go and see the guys at Extreme, and they jolly me up, and I go off recharged. And you know, so a lot of the things that we're sharing are not tangible. You know, we don't share a machine, but we might share some brain power of one person we've got who's awesome at something.
One thing you did say that's tangible is one of the nice things you said for me was
Yeah.
how you engage in advocacy.
Yes.
For me, it's about political engagement.
Yeah.
It's you know, recycling seems to be one of those social enterprises where it's so close to government
Yeah.
and the government interests as well as the people's interests. So
Yeah.
it seems to me that there's been a lot of work done in the UK about measuring, keeping the dollar in the region,
Yeah.
and the diagram you had about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I could ask the question, how powerful is that in telling local council, if you've got good
Yeah.
measures, by the way,
Yeah.
and it's not just indicator data like stats, you've got to have a well-analysed process to
come up
demonstrate
with
that
it,
you're
yeah.
actually keeping the dollar in the region.
Yeah.
The councils are not going to sit back and because they'll
ignore
lose
that.
their jobs if they don't.
Yeah.
So that's probably one powerful way of doing it.
Yeah.
Very good. Just one thing that occurred to me listening to you and also to Len Smith this morning is about telling the stories, creating opportunities to tell the stories in more places,
Yeah.
and just using those, you know, talking about inspiring communities and stuff.
You can tell me a story that's inspiring,
Yeah.
but it's your story.
Mm.
It's not my story, I haven't taken it aboard.
Yeah.
But if I know that your story has been truth tested, that is analysed in a way that has a rigour, so there's an element of truth about it, then I'm in there, I'll listen.
I think there's two different things that you guys are talking about. Like I've just come from Festival of Colour down in Wanaka, where we had a lot of inspiring speakers, and one of the people that came and spoke was Moana Jackson. And Moana Jackson told us 3 stories that for me were incredibly powerful. And he captured my heart, and he told me the story of the treaty in New Zealand and my role in it. And he didn't tell me a single fact. He didn't give me any evidence, but he captured my heart. And I think that might be what you're talking about, is that idea that for us to be, and someone was sitting at the table with me saying, oh, you know, we've got no leaders in New Zealand. And I said, everywhere I go, I meet leaders. And they're saying, yeah, but you know, like the old heroes like Robin Hood and those guys. I said, we are Robin Hood. You know, we are Robin Hood, we're Aragorn, we're the people who are the heroes. And every day in my life I run into somebody, usually it's one of you guys, who I'm just going, oh my God, you should have one of those cool little outfits like the heroes used to get in the old days so we can recognise you more easily.
Yeah.
But I think the second part is what you're talking about, Leo, is the evidence base to support it. And that's really a lot of the research that we've done.
I'm not
yeah.
suggesting that you're not also telling a richly descriptive
Yeah.
and exciting account.
Yeah, but you need to have that
But
if
they're
you...
not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. And you need to have, one of them gives you courage to act, and another one gives you the basis that you use to make your decisions, yeah. So you need to have them going hand in hand, and that's really what you're talking about, going back to your council and saying, this is awesome, these guys have inspired me, this is what I want to do, here's my numbers, here's my stats, here's how it's going to work, you know. And so you need to have both those things on the table. But if you don't have heart, then you're easily discouraged when the first person says, oh, bugger off, I'm busy talking to these guys. Like first meeting I ever went to at the Ministry for the Environment, they said, don't know why I'm even bothering talking to you guys, you can't even buy me a cup of coffee. So I was going, okay, didn't realise that was a vital part of it, coming with a bag of cash, but you know, it really, if you have to have something in your bag to survive those kind of knocks, you know, saying, oh, I'm having dinner with Fonterra tonight, you know, you guys have got nothing. And it's disheartening when you go to your government as a, you know, the first time you've ever been allowed into the room to speak with them and they say things like that to you. So you need that courage to be able to come along and you take your facts back to the next guy who's not quite as rude and abrasive and you tell him the story.